Ogden from Pepperdine Law School. I'll be one of the presenters, and my partner in crime, if you will, is Phillip, who's our Associate Director for Information Resources at the law school. I'll tell you just a little bit about myself. I've been a law professor for almost 25 years. First started using computers about 15 years ago, yes, to my children. I've used the Twine website for about 4 years. And up until about a month ago, maybe 5 weeks ago, I'd never used a palm in my life. And so I'm a fairly new palm user. Phil's a much more advanced one. And we're going to sort of talk about our experiences doing a palm technology component to the law school class this summer. We are going to move through some PowerPoint slides and tell you what we're going to tell you and then tell you what we told you. So there is a handout which has all of the sort of the bullet points of our presentation. It's down in the far right corner over here, which if you want to pick that up, you can pick it up either at the beginning of the session or if someone wants to pass them out, that would be fine with us. The slides will also be available as part of the conference archiving on the net. And any of you who wish to talk further with us about the topic, we have our phone numbers and email addresses on the handout as well as on one of the slides that we have. And that material is now up there on the screen. And so you can contact us and talk about the experience with us, or if you wish to try this at your own school. Let me just talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. We have a nice outline. This is sort of the Army system of telling what you're going to tell them and tell them and tell them what you told them. After we talk about the introduction, which is really where we got this crazy idea from and how do we begin to carry it out. We'll talk about our initial goals and objectives, which of course we sort of modified as we went along based on experience, the tools that we used, challenges that we faced, what seemed to be necessary for success, the ingredients for success, student feedback. We did a survey at the beginning of the summer term of our students and what their interests were, and we're going to do an evaluation feedback questionnaire at the end of the term. And the summer term will run another 2 weeks. And then we'll have remarks from my perspective and remarks from Phil's perspective, and then we'll have an opportunity for people to ask questions. So that's kind of where we're headed this afternoon with this particular project. And we'll try to divide up the topics, but both of us have something to say about it. We'll hear from both of us.
Thanks. First thing I want to ask is, how many of you brought your palms with you? All right. Always good to see friendly faces in the crowd. How many of you brought your CE devices with you? All right. Great statement. Did I say that? Introduction to the project. I call this project Palm Project 2000 because, I don't know, you have to have 2000 in the name. I mean, it's a part of the year, and everybody's naming everything 2000. Now, we were cautioned by Palm not to say the word P-I-L-O-T. So, and I promised our contact at Palm that I wouldn't say P-I-L-O-T, and he's probably watching via the web right now. Hi, Brian. We selected. I wanted something fun to do this summer, and I've been fiddling around with my Palm for a while, my Palm device, and I really like the utility of it. I like being able to keep track of everything, and I thought it was kind of cool. And I noticed a number of our students had them. So hey, why not get Palm involved in this and maybe go whole hog? And we all know that you can track your expenses on here. You can track your contacts, keep up with all your things that you're not doing, and be reminded of all the things you haven't done yet today. I use mine to. I have in here how to create a share on the network because I can never seem to remember the steps. all sorts of things like that. So is anybody going to challenge the utility of a PDA? Okay, good. So that's a given. All right. So we go forward here. We picked the Palm because they're practically ubiquitous. I mean, they own 80% of the market, last thing I saw. And besides that, I like them. So that's why we picked that one. And we actually had a nice in with the educational rep at Palm. Apparently there's, at least when we started talking to Brian, there was only one person doing that liaison. So I started talking to him, and I found out later that Mitch had been talking to him too. I think we were the first law school, but I don't know. Palms in the law practice. The utility of a PDA is I think, is irrefutable. I live my life off of this silly thing, and I know a lot of lawyers that do the same thing. It's a great way to reduce your liability as far as making sure you're calendared appropriately, keeping up with your with all of your silly little deadlines. Practicing law, that's why I'm a librarian. I don't like those deadlines. And I'm particularly struck with the timekeeping stuff that you can do on these Palms. There's at least 3 products that I'm aware of: the time tracker, time recorder, and time logger. And Professor Ogden will probably say a little bit more about that later. And Palms in the classroom. This was the trick. How are we going to integrate this into a law student's life? Is it a meaningful tool in the classroom, or is it just some kind of gadget that we've sort of stuck on as a worthless appendage? And that was really that was the test. What are we going to do with this silly thing? And that brings us to the goals and objectives. Professor Ogden will address that. We did ask for 2 mics, by the way.
Yes, if everybody can hear this. When we first came up with the project idea, and we found out that the Palm Corporation would donate some machines to us. Then we had to say, well, what would we want to do with this ideally? And the first question that I had really was, well, what students are going to be involved in the class? And this was a summer professional responsibility class that I've been teaching. This is the 5th week of the semester. And what's their familiarity with technology, and more specifically with PDAs? We have a group of students who are very, very familiar. We can start at a much higher level than if we have a group of students that's completely new to this. And I'll talk more about that when I talk about the survey. But we wanted to see really what could we do with the PDAs in the classroom. And a couple of things that we try to do is to have students beam information to each other. And so I had the students beam their contact information to other students. And of course, that required them to be able to use the contact program, the address book, either in the Palm environment with graffiti, or on the Palm desktop software in their computer, or with Microsoft Outlook, which is what I use. And so we were able to do that successfully. We also were able to do some demos with the Student Research Assistant. We'll talk more about it, of how you use the Palm desktop material using a laptop and a screen like this. And then also help the students try out things. And so one of the things that we did in the classroom was just to give them assignments of things to do, just kind of play with it, to get familiar with it. Having free product, we got these, they're technically, I guess, loaners to the students. They're donations to the school. That made it much easier to work with the project, because we're able to provide enough pieces of equipment for each student in the class, and they didn't have to go out and buy it. Because law students today, of course, take on great debt to go to school, and case books are very, very expensive. So the ability to provide this as kind of free product made it much easier to carry out the experiment. My primary goals with the project as a professor were to, one, personally become more familiar with technology, and to have my students become more familiar with technology. And we do that a number of ways. I have a twin site for all the courses that I teach. So I'm already, at least in terms of web-based courses, maybe a little bit more conversant than some of my colleagues who were not using those. We do use email very heavily with students, and student questions and discussion groups and all of that. And our students have to register at the beginning of the school, and they get an orientation. I'm sure it's not any different than what all of you do at your schools and stuff like that. But one of my specific pedagogical goals was to get students familiar with technology, because I think there's kind of a learning curve. Once you learn how to use a computer, it's much easier to learn learn to use a palm. I certainly found that was true with my own experience, where I'm a fairly new palm user, that the techniques I learned with computers and desktops and email were transferable. So familiarity with technology and comfort level with technology, improve their professional skills. Professional responsibility course, one of the things that we read about malpractice is a lot of malpractice is a result of poor management skills and organizational skills by lawyers. You don't really train them in that in law school. And then just a couple very, very simple things like having a reminder system. When I was in law practice back in the dark ages in the 70s, well, that was our tickle system that our secretaries maintained with red ink. And we had motion deadlines coming up. We had to get our papers in. Or we had hearing dates coming in. Blowing deadlines and stuff like that. Easy way to commit malpractice. And so having a contact program, and I integrated my my calendar with my palm, and so I get this little beep. Happened yesterday on the plane when I was flying in, and it's a great reminder system, so I don't forget committee meetings and other things that I might like to forget. So the idea of improving their skills in terms of calendaring, client contact, it's another thing, that's a quick way for the attorney-client relationship to deteriorate very fast if the lawyer doesn't return calls, doesn't give information to the clients. And in the high-tech world we are today, the expectations that clients will have will be informed by their experience on the net. I want the service providers to have that level of consumer friendliness and quickness of response. And if you don't get it, it can be very, very frustrating. So preparing students for law practice, another thing. We all know the practice of laws as well as the practice of all other professions is being changed dramatically by technology. And so I felt like we need to equip our students for that so that when they join a law firm or other government setting, they aren't totally clueless. We don't want to just prepare them to practice in the 20th century, but in the 21st century. So those three goals: familiarity with technology, improve their professional skills, and the PDAs to do that, and then preparing them for law practice were really important components of the project. For me as a professor, that's the academic or the educational component of it. And there's a really cool website. It's palmlaw.com website run by a lawyer. It's www.palmlaw.com, run by a lawyer who's, I think, a staff member of the LA County Bar Association. And he's got all sorts of links to software and articles, and what sort of first triggered our interest. One of the first things was a series of articles in the California Lawyer about use of palms and other PDAs by lawyers and how it was just growing very rapidly. And lawyers were replacing their daytimers with personal digital assistants, and it was happening very, very quickly. And I know I used to keep phone numbers in little pieces of paper, and I wondered, where did I put that piece of paper? Well, one of the first things I did is input all my family phone numbers, and my spouse is working in another city, so I have a community marriage, so she's got about 4 different phone numbers and email. I've got 3 kids in college, they've got their phone numbers, email addresses, and all of that. Well, I've got that all right up here, so I can, if I'm driving on the freeway on my cell phone, probably not a good idea to do that, but I can input the number and call right up. It's extremely convenient. And so lawyers can do that with their clients, and students can learn how to do that to give a sense of sort of customer service or responsiveness that clients love. And when they don't get that, that can be a real sort of one of the first steps on the road to an attorney-client relationship that fails. Clients don't pay the fees, or they see malpractice, and things go downhill very, very fast. So the pedagogical goals were more generally focused on law school, but focused specifically on this class. And we'll talk more about what some of that means. And now we're going to shift to our next topic, which is tools used. And Phil's going to talk about that.
As Greg mentioned, we did get the palms for free. And we're still not sure exactly what our relationship is regarding those palms. But we ended up with... I can't remember exactly how many, but predominantly we have Palm 3Xs, which are 4 megabytes of memory, and we got I think we ended up with 5 Palm 3XEs, which are 8 megs of memory. I don't know, probably most of you already know that, being Palm owners. But my goal was to get something that had enough RAM on that thing so we could put some documents on there and just load it up, and some other applications. And this particular class, the model rules were available in WordPerfect format. That wasn't that big of a deal, and they didn't end up taking up that much space. So the 4 megabytes seem to be adequate, and as far as I know, no one's run out of space on that. But as a doc reader, we used iSilo. Actually, we used the free version of that because we didn't want to spend any money because they're real cheap. But and iSilo free has a number of limitations that were kind of frustrating. We actually ended up loading the full demo package, which will allow you to search and cut and paste and do some other things that aren't quite as limiting as the iSilo free. Avant Go. How many of you have used Avant Go? Is that a cool program? I like that one. I'm a big fan of the Hollywood.com one myself. I'm having a little trouble with mine right now. It's kind of frustrating. And WeSync, we actually haven't gotten that much out of the WeSync program yet. Is anybody familiar with WeSync? WeSync is you create a virtual community, a WeSync community, and then you invite people to join it. And when they join, you can share different things with them, primarily contact lists and calendars. The contact list, ideally, in this case, would contain the names and email addresses and phone numbers of all the students in the class and the professor's name and number and the support person's name and number. I don't know if we ever actually accomplished that yet. We're right in the middle of the course at the moment, so the experiment continues. But one thing we did do is we got the calendar set up so every day that the class meets, the students can see their syllabus and their assignments and what to do for that particular class period. And that was kind of neat. I already mentioned the model rules in Palm doc format, and that was, I guess the doc format is pretty standard. You can use it with any reader, but we chose the iSilo reader. MyDocs Online, I never actually fiddled with that. Did we get very far with the MyDocs Online?
I uploaded the model rules on MyDocs Online and then downloaded them to the Palm and got hieroglyphics. So I uploaded them in a format that wasn't readable when it went from the MyDocs Online to the Palm. So doing it with iSilo worked much better. But I think MyDocs Online is really nice if you have a lot of documents that are worked on. A number of different people work on them because they're web accessible on the MyDocs server.
One of the tools we tried to get was keyboards for all the students in the class. And I spoke to the guy in charge of sales at Landwehr, and he said, no problem. And that was the last time I heard from him. So, and that was several weeks ago. So, maybe we'll have them before the end of the class. But the computer lab setup, we wanted to make sure that the students could synchronize whether or not they were computer savvy. And so we set up some sync stations in the computer lab. I think we ended up setting up about 6 or 8 stations. And that was a great idea. And I can talk more about that in the challenges part. But it comes under budgetary restraints as well. Probably the biggest asset to this whole venture was the research assistant we ended up getting. Jordan was, and Jordan, if you're watching, hi. Jordan has been great. And he has been very proactive, initiated a lot of things that have been going on. He's taught a number of the Palm sessions in the class. The way the class is organized, it's a 3-hour meeting twice a week. The first 2 meetings are typically substantive professional responsibility material, and I don't know how many sessions included. The 3rd hour is Palm oriented.
7,
essentially 7 hours on the Palm device. And Jordan has taught a number of those so far, just covering that sort of thing. And he's coordinated service when we needed service and that sort of thing. So the research assistant was key in this particular course and this application of technology. Here are the challenges. Is this me again?
Yes.
All right. The sync in the NT lab with growing profiles. Now my lab manager isn't here. He wanted to go somewhere else. When we brought the students in the first time to try to teach everybody how to sync, nobody can sync unless they were logged on as an administrator on that machine. So something went haywire somewhere, and that wasn't a barrel of fun, but we ended up getting everybody sorted out in the end. As I sort of mentioned before, time and staffing are the ubiquitous challenge in incorporating anything new, really. It doesn't even have to be technology. Jordan, we're paying him $10 an hour, I think, which is the standard research assistant rate. We sort of stole him from the dean's office, so that worked out pretty well. We were able to get Avant Go to work rather well, but Twin, to my knowledge, still is not Palm friendly because of the authentication. So we hope one day to either get rid of Twin or incorporate the Twin with the Palm if we're going to continue on with this. Enthusiasm was not a challenge. I was enthusiastic. Professor Ogden was enthusiastic. And guess what? All the students were too. And I was kind of surprised because I thought some of the Luddites in there might just hold us all back and we would be in bad shape. But everybody seemed to be into it, even when we were working through the little bugs that would crop up in the classroom or in the computer labs with the synchronization. I did have one woman continually say, "I can't get mine to work, mine's broken. I can't get mine to work, mine's broken." And everyone, I had 3 people in the room helping out, and I guess all of us sort of avoided her until the very end. But in the end, she was like, "I can't believe this is so wonderful." And she had just got her horoscope on Go, so enthusiasm was not a challenge. And the normal frustrations of adopting technology. Now we had originally, when I started putting this deal together with our contact at Palm, we had, I think, 8 people enrolled in the course, plus a professor. And then every once in a while I would check back with admissions, and then there would be, there's like 12 people. Oh, I'd get on the phone, Brian, and talk to them. "Okay, Phil, I can probably squeeze out a couple more units for you." Then we had 18 people plus the professor. And I was like, last time he told me he gave me everything he had. Is he just telling me a story? And he was. But actually, if it hadn't been for an anonymous donor, we would have been stuck with a couple people watching and not participating. Because our normal budget challenge was 0. We did this all with 1 student worker and my free time and a little bit of free time from some other people. So this sort of grew and developed on its own, or stagnated on its own as we've gone forward. But I would say, for not spending a lot of money, we've done pretty well as far as getting some data and finding out how well this will work in a classroom. Professor Ogden will hit the ingredients for success.
Well, one of the things that made this a real fun project is that Phil and I have worked together on other technology projects. He and our lab manager and one of our top librarians come to this conference for about 4 years. We come together, we share our different perspectives, and we work together very well. So I think that's a real, unless you're really a very, very tech-savvy law professor, you need to work with an IT person and a librarian to make something like this work well. Partly that's because collaboration, you can work better with collaboration, and I saw that with a number of the students in the classroom. The different levels of experience in working with Palm and computers led students to be real helpful to each other, and that was true for Phil and I. For example, we're using PowerPoint. This is the first time I've ever used PowerPoint in my life. I was always sort of afraid to try it, but it's actually quite easy. And having Phil there, we did the slides together. After sort of brainstorming initially what we wanted to cover, we did that one day, and then 2 days later we put them on the slides, and then we had Katie, our reference librarian, look at them, and then Jordan looked at them, and so what you've got is a bunch of people have looked at that, and I'm going to use PowerPoint in my classes this fall because I feel comfortable with it. So having that kind of fit, and Phil's a former student of mine, so we have a good relationship from a good long standing. So I think that's really, really important. So if you're a professor end, get to know your IT people and vice versa if you want to try something like this. It just works a lot better, and it's a lot more fun. The next ingredient for success is summertime, summer class enrollment. There are fewer students. I had asked our associate dean to approve a 3-unit PR course. Our normal PR course is 2 units. That's not enough, given what's happening in the law of lawyering and multidisciplinary practice. Ethics 2000, all sorts of developments in the legal ethics field, the globalization. And so last fall, when we were planning the summer schedule, I asked her for an extra unit on an experimental basis, not really being sure how I was going to use it. Well, that was providential because in the spring, when Phil and I started talking, we had a little bit of extra time, 5 or 6 hours, that we could then plug into this technology component. And so we marketed the course a little bit with that in mind. And a number of the students were students that I had previously in my first year civil procedure class. So they were familiar with the TWEN website and how much I've used that and other sorts of things of that sort. But the summer class enrollment made a big, big difference because it was a small group of students, 18. And that was a manageable size for us to get the hardware, the Palm 3s, from the Palm Corporation without having to spend a lot of law school money. It meant that there was a small enough group of people for us to work with them, Phil and Jordan and I and David. If there were problems or students needed a little more personal attention, and the classroom environment was more informal because it's a summer class. And so I think that made a big, big difference. I wouldn't attempt something like this in one of my regular school year classes where I had anywhere from 50 to 120 students. There just aren't too many students to make that well. We were very fortunate to have a good student research assistant, Jordan Gimbel, who's I think a second-year law student, but he worked in the computer industry between college and law school, so he's very tech-savvy. He's one of these young kids. There's a sort of inverse correlation between age and understanding of technology. Or what I told Phil about why I want to do all this stuff is to keep up with my college-age sons who are computer science majors. Well, I can't really keep up with them, but at least I can pretend. But Jordan was great. He was available. Our dean believes in technology and encourages us to go to CALI, so he authorized a second research assistant for me. I had one that's working on my scholarship, and that was Jordan. We got him for a period of time. He's going to help us do an article on this experiment afterwards. And so he's just been a real wonderful help. He has planned most of the one-hour sessions in terms of I've told him what pedagogical goals I have for the session and the things I think I'd like him. We plan it together, and then he implements it. He goes on the websites and checks out the software, does a sort of workup through, rehearsal of what we're going to do, and then we usually meet for a couple hours, a couple days before the class and in the morning of the class. And so he takes over that third-hour presentation. The students, I'm sure, are great after listening to me talk about legal ethics for 2 hours. That third hour goes a little bit better if they're doing something different. And presents the material to the students, has them practice whatever skill we're trying to teach them, does the lesson plan, which comes out. We distribute that on the net, actually on TWEN, and we also get a hard copy version of that. And so that made just a wonderful, because Phil and I are, we're both pretty busy. We've got lots of other things going on, and so this made that work better. Good fit with the class. This is a professional responsibility class. And one of the things that I emphasize is their professional obligations as lawyers, and particularly with regard to malpractice. All the ways that you can get into malpractice trouble while being a very good lawyer, but someone who's not particularly well organized. So some of the priorities that I had for skills I wanted the students to learn with the POM include things that will make them more organized lawyers with good managerial skills or good professional skills, and that alone reduce their malpractice exposure. And malpractice insurers will give them credit for that in the premium. They have good calendar organizing systems and things like that. And the POM is just such a great tool for that. So it's not really a law office management course, but it's really more the technology component. More it has a focus on malpractice avoidance. Although I don't really say it that way, but that's one of my major goals. So it really fits well with this class. I also teach civil procedure during the school year, and I could see doing a PDA experiment with that. If size were not a barrier as it is, because it's nice to be able to have, like we have the model rules on here in the iSilo format. You do the same thing with the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, or if you're an evidence or trial practice course with the Federal Rules of Evidence and things like that. Because there are settings where being able to pop this out and just find the rule site that you need, it can be very, very useful when you're away from your laptop or your desktop machine. Reasonable expectations for learning, that's our sort of final ingredient for success. And that was sort of crucially based upon the level of experience of the POM users. And virtually all of our students, with only 2 exceptions, had never used a POM before. So we were talking with brand new users, as am I a brand new user, and so that meant that we had to sort of focus on more basic skills. And so and not try to accomplish too much. Initially, when we had our outline with the Palm Corporation, we had lots of different ideas of things that we wanted to do. We had to scale that back some, in part because the summer course is compressed. It's 2 times a week for 3 hours. We had to allow a certain amount of lead time for students to get comfortable with equipment and technology and sort of play with it. So the first class where we gave them their machines, we introduced them a little bit to it, and then we said, all right, you go home and just play with this, try graffiti and other things like that, get comfortable with it. And then the next class we're able to start some of our more basic goals, which I'll talk a little bit about the classroom progression of what we taught the students in a later section of this discussion. So all of those things I think made it a very workable experience, and one that was very positive for our students. And I'm delighted that students were enthusiastic, that we didn't have any Luddites or any people who are anti-technology. And I suppose if they didn't want to do this, we didn't have anybody drop out, but if they didn't want to do this, they could have dropped out of the course and take it during the school year. But I think either that means students today are, because of their age, are more technology savvy, or because they've experienced technology in other law school classes in our environment and felt that, yes, this is doable. Or if they had questions, and like Jordan, we had another student in class, Patrick Sabatini, who's also very tech savvy. He was our original choice for research assistant, but he couldn't do it because of working. But having those resources in the class, fellow students, I think was very, very helpful, because students might not come to me or Phil to ask a question, but they would turn to a fellow student if they had something that they weren't sure about how to do. And once again, using that collaborative model, which I think is so crucial for people learning things when they're not that familiar. Well, those are the ingredients for success. And our next topic is student feedback. We administered, as I said, a survey developed by Phil and Jordan and I to the students at the beginning of the class. I think we actually did hour number 2, or right before the beginning of hour number 2. So they had the Palms for a few days. And we basically wanted to kind of find out what they were interested in, what was most interesting and what not. And so our first question asked them whether they'd used the Palm before. And we had 18 students in the class. We got 15 survey responses. 13 had not ever used it before. 2 had, and the other 3 just didn't fill out the survey. So that's pretty normal. The 2 students who had, one had been a paralegal before coming to law school, and she had used the Palm in her law firm. She was a paralegal. And the other student, I guess, just was technically interested and had gotten one on their own. So basically, everybody else was brand new, just like I was. As I said, a month ago, I was just opening this up for the first time. And so with that in mind, we hoped that most of the students were familiar with computers. They either desktops or laptops, which turned out to be the case. And so basically what we're doing is trying to extend their understanding of basic computer software type tools and to put that into the Palm environment. Most students, the vast majority, said that they would use the Palm for an internet connection if that was easy to do. Now, of course, we have the Palm 3s that don't have the wireless modems and the ability to connect to the internet, but some people I know have higher versions of Palm which have the wireless modem. But we were interested in the answer to that question to see would they use it for internet connection if it was available. And the vast majority of students said yes, they would, which said to me in part that they were familiar and comfortable with the net and had used it for other purposes in law school, and of course they will continue that when they're in law practice. We surveyed a number of possible Palm applications and asked them to list the ones that they were most interested in. So basically I had a longer list, which I've actually posted the full survey on my Twin site for my summer class. Of course, I don't know if people can access the Twin site, but we'll try to figure out some way to post the whole survey so that you can access it after this conference. Maybe if I learn how to do my own homepage, I could do that. Because it's real interesting. I'm only going to give you the sort of the top 4 or 5 choices, but there were lots of other choices with several answers. But these were the top in terms of numerical responses. Email is number 1. And my boss, the dean of our law school, Richard Lynn, is very tech savvy, very interested in technology, very supportive of us for doing this. And he tells me that he has to go to a lot of boring meetings, budget meetings and things like that. And that's when he reads a lot of his email and composes replies. And then when he comes back and hot syncs with his desktop machine, then he can send all of the replies. And it looks like to us, like, man, he's really managing his email. And really, when we send him something, he responds to us, which I really like. But he's able to do that while he's sitting in some other meeting talking about whatever they talk about that the administrators do that makes them so wise. And so having an email That was a little bit of sarcasm, I guess, or at least. Hopefully, Richard, if you're not listening, I still like you. So email and using email in a portable environment is definitely a top feature. I think in part that reflects students' familiarity with email. They use it a lot already. And so extending that skill to a desktop or to a PDA environment is not as daunting as it might be if they were learning how to use it at first. Of course, that's good for this malpractice client contact function, because it shouldn't be too hard. In fact, maybe already have been designed that you could set up a system where either by email or access to a website, you could provide lawyers provide clients with access to information about their case. The bane of lawyers' existence is clients returning phone calls or clients calling them saying what's happening with my case, and lawyers not returning the phone calls. So I think you should be able to set that up. I don't know how to do the technology of it. On a website or through an automatic email system where you give them so much information, they feel like, wow, he really cares or she really cares about my case. They're doing things. I know exactly what I need to know about my case without having to interrupt this busy person. So the second one was address book. And that, of course, may reflect familiarity with Outlook or other address book programs. I went, of course, from a completely low-tech written note system to importing my contacts list from Outlook and then adding information about my kids and others, and then having that. I actually use the address book function on the Palm much more than I use my desktop one, because I take this with me wherever I am. So if I'm in the car, I'm on the car phone, or I'm at home out by the pool, I've got a portable phone, I need to call someone. It's very, very convenient to do that. And we have an address book at home, an old one that my wife prepared when we were first married. Well, I mean, it's got numbers in there that we haven't called in 20 years. So it's like, and this seems to me to be easier to keep up, because if I keep up the address book either on the Palm or on my desktop, when I hot sync it, it transfers the information back and forth. And the students seem really much to like the address book. That was their second choice. To Do was third. I haven't really used the To Do list all that much, but that was tied with number 4, Calendar, which I do use a lot. As we said, Bill and David were able to put the syllabus for my course, the class assignments, on the calendar problem, so a student clicked onto or accessed the let's say, July 7th, which is our last class, they would be able to see on the calendar what the reading assignment was, and if we were doing a PDA component, what that consisted of. And of course, what they find out is that we have a rep from Timeslips on that class who's going to do billing software for the Palm environment presentation for the students. And I thought that would be very helpful to them, because most students today are going into firm environments where there's a good deal of pressure on them to keep their billable hours up. And as a young attorney, they may not be used to billing or keeping track of their time, and so they end up spending more time than a more experienced attorney would be. So being able to have this little cigarette case size thing in your pocket, and every time you're doing something, and it's not just when you're in your office at your desk, to be able to keep track of the time, that seems to be really a really useful thing. So those are the 4 top Palm applications. In part, maybe because that's what most Palm users use, or it may just be that's because these are new users, and these are the things that most easily transfer from an existing computing environment. Waterworld Reference tool, we got the model rules on there. It's the ABA version, which for a classroom environment is great, but if you're out in the real world, of course, you have to have your own state's version of that, or like, if you're like California and New York, we have our own weird versions of the ethics rules. But to have that on Palm environment is very useful if you need to consult a provision of the rules. If you're in the courthouse, I got a call from, I do a little bit of ethics advising for lawyers in California. I got a call from a former classmate of mine who had just come out of the bathroom in the Ventura County Courthouse, and he called me and said he'd had a juror look at him really funny and mutter under his breath. And this is the lawyer who's a criminal defense lawyer who was the counsel for a man who's now in state prison for murder in a very, very famous case locally, where this lawyer got a lot of grief from the community for some things that he did. And so he was not very popular in that community, and this juror sort of looked at him and swore in his breath at him. And so he called me up on his cell phone and said, gee, should I inform the judge about this, because this could be a basis for jury misconduct. So we sat there and had that kind of conversation with him. If he'd had a Palm there, he could have gone to the California ethics rules during the trial conduct and maybe had that in front of him. Well, I had my book in my office, and we talked on the phone. So there's some real utility, I think, to having reference tools of rules versions, civil procedure, evidence, ethics rules, then maybe lots of other applications, and having them accessible here, even more so than a notebook. I mean, if you're in the bathroom, you can pull this out and fired up. We might not want to do that with notebook computers. Yeah, really. So, we also did a number of learning topic survey. We had about 15 or 20 items on there. And this is sort of tracks the application interest of downloading email, showing them how to do that with the hot sync from their desktop, and you can set different options. Phil showed me how to set just new email, because I didn't want to download all the stuff that's on there. When I get email, I guess we all probably get tons of email. I try to manage it by reading and deleting or moving stuff to a folder that I'm not ready to delete, and then just leaving on the inbox messages that I have to do something with. And so none of those would show up in my Palm unless I hadn't opened them yet. So I like having the new message feature, but you can do whatever you want with it. So we showed them how to do that. We show them how to transfer data from the computer to the Palm, and of course is the hot sync feature, as well as Avantgo. We showed them how to do that, and many of the students were able to sign on to Avantgo at the lab. I wasn't, but I signed on the next day and got all the way through the Avantgo steps to register on my desktop. And then I picked the top websites that I wanted, and then every time you hot sync, that updates the website. And then if you're off, record or in the classroom, or you're driving somewhere and you want to get some news, you can get the Fox News website, or there are lots of others. And that's kind of a nice feature to show them how to do. So the top 4 learning topics: download email, transfer data from the computer to the Palm, importing documents. The student really wanted to know how to do that. So if you have a Word or WordPerfect document, to be able to import that from a desktop environment or a laptop environment into the Palm PDA environment. And then Datebook, which goes along, of course, with the calendar function, keeping track of the class, as well as keeping track of the appointments and things like that. I put my Weight Watchers meeting on there. Yesterday when I was on the plane, I'm giving my students a midterm yesterday. Conveniently while I'm traveling here, that jingled on my Palm while I was somewhere between Los Angeles and Chicago. So the student feedback, this was at the beginning of the course, and so we're going to do another evaluation at the end and see what they've learned from it, what we could do better, what worked and what didn't, and then we're going to do a paper, an article with Jordan Self that we'll try to post on, hopefully on one of the CALI Journal website. Remarks on the educator's perspective is our next option. As I sort of said briefly, I wanted students to be able to use technology in the classroom. I think we're, in some ways, way behind with business schools and medical schools and other things. We have 2 other graduate schools covered on the business school and the psych school, and they mostly serve working adults. They use distance education heavily and have for several years, and I think do it quite effectively. We generally have a sort of traditional model of law students with a number of older students, but primarily students in their early 20s who live in the area and go to school, or they move into the area and go to school at our site or location, the traditional law school education model. So we may not feel quite as much need to do distance education as working adult schools. On the other hand, I can think of lots of things that I could do. I knew how to do distance education better that would enhance the classroom environment right now. I teach civil procedure at 8 o'clock in the morning, mainly because as I got older, I became a morning person with a stressing thought, but can't sleep past 6 o'clock. So, but I teach, Gen X and Gen Y students, and I have children that age, so I know they are not morning people. So between 8 and 8:30, I get 8 o'clock. I've got the real diehard morning people, or the real intense folks in the class, and that's about half my class. And 8 and 8:30, the rest of them sort of slog in. I used to blame that on the LA freeway system, but I don't think that's really what it is. I just think it's the age of the kids and the culture they're part of. Because my own children are like that. They don't get up early unless they absolutely have to. So for all those students who are coming in and they're half awake, if I could somehow, maybe webcast my lectures on the net or something, or have some sort of tutorial. If you didn't get there right at 8 o'clock, you had to complete this tutorial on the class of that day. I could supplement and give them something they're not getting out because they aren't getting to class on time. So technology classroom is a very important goal or objective for me. I want to not just keep up with my kids and with my students, but the world's changing and we have to adapt to it. And it's going to change whether we adapt or not, but I think it's important for us to adapt. And it's not just change, it's also higher quality. I think what we have available today, the ability to, I use Westlaw because I'm more familiar with that. I go into my Trend site. If there's a new Supreme Court case, I get it on Westlaw, I do a link to my students and I say, read that from the next class. That is 100 times easier than what my professors had to do when I was in law school in the early 70s when the new Supreme Court came down. They could give us the site, we'd build a library, but there was maybe 2 or 3 volumes, and if somebody else got to it first, you were out of luck. Somebody grabbed it. So technology, I think, enhances and extends what we do in the classroom. Very law students for practice, same thing. Lawyers are adopting technology right and left. Hence all the different websites, companies, e-commerce companies that are informed to provide web services for attorneys, the use of personal digital assistants, the use of computers. Remember, not that long ago, 10, 12 years ago, when lawyers would not have desktop machines on the front of their office unless they were junior associates. That was considered to be clerical work, to have people use computers. Now, today, all lawyers, virtually all lawyers, have desktops or laptops or notebooks on their desk, and we all use it. It just seems to be an essential part of professional practice. So we have to prepare our students for that. We're also, of course, in a very competitive environment in law schools. And not just U.S. news, but with the number of students going to law school dropping, competition is there. We've got new online alternatives, so we just have to be more responsive to the marketplace than maybe we have traditionally in educational institutions. Professional responsibility in PDAs, I've pretty much talked about that. Calendaring and client contacts, anything you can do to make sure you don't blow deadlines, and if you communicate with your clients, you do those 2 things alone, you're going to be far more successful as an attorney in private practice. And I mean, these principles extend beyond legal profession. I mean, think about it if you're a patient of a doctor. I have a doctor at UCLA Medical Center who uses email. I love it. We communicate by email. I get far more information out of him than if I would if I had to call him or I had to make an appointment. So it's a more general perspective, I think, that for professional practice. Remarks from an IT perspective, Phil's going to give you those.
It's always fun to take on a new project when you don't have anything going on. This summer was no exception. It was a boring, lazy summer, nothing to do except to install about 35 machines and get some faculty trained and a few other things. So I thought, well, shoot, let's just do this. This should be fun. And about 3 or 4 weeks into the summer session, all of my student workers quit. And when I say all, it wasn't that many. It was about 5 people, though. And that was my whole staff, essentially. And this is about the time I realized, oh no, we've got 18 students enrolled, and we only have 13, 14 palms. We've got to come up with some more palms. So I had a palm that was university owned. Well, I'll just kick that into the fray, and I better go out and buy my own palm. So I did. I got a nice little Palm 5X. It has never synchronized with my desktop machine since I got it. I don't know how many weeks ago. And I hope one day to synchronize because the battery's nearly dead. If anybody has a Palm 5 sync cradle, I could sure use a charge. But it's worked out okay, fortunately. But just be aware that it takes a lot more time than you think. And fun is fun, and we have had fun with this project. As it turns out, I was able to delegate quite a lot of what my ordinary responsibility would be in this kind of project to the research assistant. But I did notice right when we got the palms to the students that immediately they began passing notes with their little IR reports, and that was somewhat gratifying for me. I don't know how the professor felt about that. At least they're using it, right? Coordinating with the vendor was actually it went very well. I know Mitch has been working with the same people, and I don't know what your experience has been, but mine has been very good. And our contact is very helpful, very responsive, always returns phone calls. We've had a number of palms that were shipped that for some reason they didn't work. I don't know if they were dropped at some point or what, but we didn't use any special channels to get service. We just said, hey, we've got a defective unit. Can you help us out? And we had one practically the next day. So Palm was very responsive, and their product was reliable. except for those two that we've had to replace. But I'm not sure if that wasn't sort of a end user problem and not a Palm problem. As we said before, and we'll say it again, research assistant was key to this project. I mean, you've got to have somebody who's really interested in the project and is sold on what it is and really buys into the process and wants to participate. And in this case, a very proactive person. And of course, these go to 11, which many of you are familiar with. This is Spinal Tap. I mean, this was just cool. We just wanted to try it. And I know that's an oblique reference, and if you don't understand, you can come up and ask me later. I was told that any techie who doesn't get it should quit their job, but I won't enforce that. At this point, we've got set aside for questions from the floor. And according to that clock, no time has passed. We have about 7-8 minutes. I wanted to just take a minute and say we have openings at Pepperdine Law School. If anybody needs a job or wants plenty of free parking next to the beach, Pepperdine is located in Malibu, California. I wish I could show you a picture. Go to our website. We have a help desk / tech services liaison position open. We need a webmaster, electronic services librarian, a reference services librarian, and we're wide open. We're ready for people. And our normal spade of 30 student workers. So if anybody wants to apply to Pepperdine Law School, I'm sure we can get you in. We only pay $7 an hour, but it's rewarding work. Very rewarding. Any questions? Now I know there's two ladies in the back who are going to do a presentation on Palm tips or PDA tips. When is that?
Saturday at 9:30. There are 4 of us that we invite any Palm user who's basically exchanging tips.
Can we exchange via beaming? Okay.
I've got a quick question addressing that. Would it be possible to record those tips in some format that could be available?
Yeah, we're going to have it in PowerPoint. We're going to try and have it maybe in MemoCAD or something.
Well, in my particular case, I'm not able to attend on Saturday, so I was wondering if it was somehow on the CALI website.
Or on the CALI site.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of our stuff will be available as well. To my knowledge, I think they do that with everybody's. Yeah.
Was the purpose of this project to learn how to use the Palm in your real-life setting, or did this enhance the classroom experience in any way, or was the goal to enhance the classroom experience in any way?
My own personal goal was to see if this was something that we could use in the law school setting, and to see if it was, I was looking into maybe standardizing on a Palm for every student, and is it worthwhile in a classroom setting, or is it more of a professional tool? I don't know if you want to address that more.
The classroom sessions where we did this as opposed to the normal classroom session were really quite different. Normal classroom session, I lecture, I ask students questions, we have some interactive discussion. For this one, we had some technology presentations and a lot of students working on individual assignments or working in couples or teams. So I would say it was quite different. It's a different type of classroom model than traditional legal education. So the idea, I suppose, is that we want them to be able to use this in their professional life. So it's kind of teaching professional skills, which PR, of course, normally doesn't do. It's more a substantive law course. So I guess I would say there was some of both, but it was nice in the summer course with an intense concentration and compression of the course to do something different because students tend to fade out. So I think it benefited the classroom that way. It wasn't interactive in the sense where I beamed the question and they beamed back answers to me. That would have been much more pedagogical focused on learning the PR substance of the course. That certainly is a legitimate thing to do, but I wouldn't have wanted to do that with students who are as new to PDAs as my students were, because they needed to learn more basic techniques. Other questions? Or yes?
What are your plans for the future? Are you going to try and do this again next year, or where are you going to go with this?
Well, this project was sort of a trial balloon to see, and we're not done. We don't know, what the end will be. Hopefully, it'll be a positive end. Maybe everyone will, commit Harry Carey on their palms at the end of it. in the fall, through the course of the summer, we have been staying in contact with Palm to see what kind of help they could give us as far as implementing this on a broader scale. And this was sort of a trial balloon to see, is it a worthwhile, expense for them or for us to pursue this? And if it is, and I think it probably will be, then we're looking at probably some wireless PDAs, probably like a Palm 7 in the very near future. Well, whether it's going to be in the fall or in the, maybe next fall, I can't tell you for sure. But I will tell you, this summer, the whole building is going wireless. So, yeah, maybe I wasn't supposed to say that.
You just had one additional comment. Phil and I have had so much fun doing this. We probably will speak at CALI next year, and now we know it's going to be in Boston, so we get to go to a new place and either do, Palm the sequel or some other sort of topic. Yes, question back there.
Since you did this for a professional responsibility class, did you use encryption or talk about because I know some jurisdictions have indicated that they would require encryption beforehand.
We didn't teach them how to do encryption. I did talk about it when we talked about client confidentiality with both faxes and emails, and I actually shared a story from the experience of one of my former students, a very prominent trial attorney who had received a fax with confidential strategy information from opposing counsel. Of course, that's dealt with an ABA ethics opinion. We finally figured out that that was sent by a disgruntled employee of that law firm who was angry at the lawyer. And since they faxed or mailed, actually, lots of stuff to these firms all the time because they're against each other in lawsuits, it was actually quite easy to do. And so I advised him, I said, gee, you probably shouldn't look at it, but if you've done that, you should return it to the lawyer and say, and tell them that you've gotten the information and that you've returned it to them. So that's a common technology-related confidentiality issue. And we did talk about that, but I don't know how to do encryption with Palm beaming, so I couldn't really tell them how to do that.
Any other questions? This course was, the incorporation of the Palm in the class was very rudimentary. I don't know if you picked up on that. We were just trying to get it in their hands and get them familiar with the product or the type of product. So probably would have been very similar if we used C devices or something along those lines.
But from that standpoint, if you have, for those of you professors in the room, if you want to try something similar, you can really do it with a lot of different courses. With the civil procedure course, you can do it with the federal rules, evidence or trial practice, the federal rules of evidence, contracts, you can do the UCC, any course there's a restatement in, you should be able to get some of the same type of features using iStyle or some other program like that. If you're doing it at the basic skill level that we were doing at, it's real easy to integrate it with any sort of course. If you want to do more advanced applications, you probably will have to stick to an elective course where you can pre-screen students and say, we expect a certain level of competence going into the course. But I can see high-tech internet law courses like that using things like this as an integral part of the course.
Any other questions? All right, looks like we're right on time. Thank you very much.